Hi everybody, good morning to Europe. Matthias and colleagues, many thanks for the kind invitation to speak. I have to say it's the first time I've had to do one of these sort of international meetings by Zoom. So apologies if I'm either muffled or in other ways anxious or uncertain. And so it is a real pleasure to talk about our work that is attempting to advance both precision medicine and precision population health for non-European, for Asian populations in particular. And what I'm about to share, I think, is deeply synergistic with Annette's wonderful talk that we just heard, in the sense that it's trying to achieve very similar ambitions, but in a different setting. And so we're not competing, we're very much potentially complementary with what Annette has been leading for many years. So, Matthias, as you pointed out, I've now got a number of positions and projects that I'm pushing forward. My main appointment now is actually in Singapore at the Lee Kong Chan School of Medicine, but it's a joint appointment with Imperial and maintain my long-standing links with the School of Public Health at Imperial. I'm still on faculty there. More recently, I've also been made the Chief Scientific Officer of an organisation known as PRECISE, which is a wholly owned governmental instrument which aims to deliver the National Precision Medicine Programme for the country of Singapore. I also lead two population studies, the S200K study in Singapore and South Asia Biobank based in India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. And it's these programs of work that I'm going to talk about. What enthuses me scientifically and therefore what shaped the trajectory of what I've tried to put together? What enthuses me is trying to understand why South Asians, in particular, have such tremendously high rates of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. It's quite difficult to overestimate just how disadvantaged they are compared with other ethnic groups. Here, for example, is data from the UK showing the incidence per 1,000 person years of diabetes among South Asians, blue, Europeans, red, across the life course. And you see that in both men and women, across the life course, South Asians are doing approximately 3 times worse than the European counterparts. So by the age of 60, basically 3 out of every 4 South Asians have diabetes. And that the metabolic health of a young South Asian, I'm 52 now, I don't consider myself young anymore, so a 35-year-old South Asian has the metabolic health of a 65-year-old, a retiring European, 30 years older. That's a tremendous health inequality. And looking at the global picture, diabetes is an important problem in Europe. UK has several million people with diabetes. But India, as a single country, is struggling with almost 100 million people with type 2 diabetes. So it's a tremendous global public health problem. And when I started getting excited by non-communicable disease in non-European populations, I first started out 20 years back, I was convinced that it was obviously going to be genetically driven. And we spent a lot of time trying to pursue a genetic susceptibility in the population. And the answer is, after 20 years of GWAS and even sequencing work, we can't find a genetic basis that explains this threefold increased risk. Here we got 2 panels. We've got effect allele frequencies on the left and odds ratios for diabetes from effect alleles on the right. This is from the most recent Diamante paper reporting hundreds of genetic variants predicting diabetes. There's no difference in effect allele frequencies, and if there is a difference in effect sizes, it's one that's adverse for Europeans, not adverse for South Asians. And so we can't find a genetic basis for it. Similarly, if we think about the traditional risk factors for diabetes, obesity, physical inactivity, amino acids, metabolic kind of parameter, we can't use that to explain the increased risk either. I've then underlined in the title the concept of measured risk factors, because I'm going to go on to say that there's an awful lot that we haven't measured, which is why we've had to start at one level, start from scratch over the last 5 years. So, do simple things like increased adiposity in South Asians explain the susceptibility. Well, on the left-hand panel, we've got the prevalence of diabetes among South Asians in red, Europeans in blue, and you see that a lean South Asian, BMI 20, has got the metabolic health of an obese European with a BMI of 30. And when we model it all using the measured risk factors, we find that throw everything in, including genetics, everything that we've measured, there's still at least a twofold higher risk of diabetes in an Asian compared to a European living in the same environment in West London. It's not just between South Asians versus non-South Asian populations that show interesting patterns. This is now unpublished data generated from our work in South Asia, in which we can see tremendous differences within South Asia too. So this is the prevalence of diabetes amongst South Asians living in 5 different regions: Bangladesh, India, North India, South Pakistan, Sri Lanka. You see the Bangladeshis are doing reasonably well, but in contrast, the South Indians, the grey symbols, are doing really poorly. There's a 3- to 4-fold difference even within the South Asian subcontinent. And again, if we try to say, well, can we account for this by the ordinary measures, age, sex, BMI, waist to girth ratio, sedentary time, physical activity, socioeconomic factors, this is the prevalence in South India, high, and even when you adjust for all the sort of simple measures, it still remains remarkably elevated compared to Bangladesh down here. We don't understand it, this gradient even within the population. So, I've focused on diabetes as the lead-in, as the classic disease that's complex and multifactorial with genetic, behavioral, and environmental components. But it's not just diabetes that's distinct between Asians and Europeans. There are a whole range of diseases. At one level, you could talk about thalassemia. There are some diseases which are clearly complex and multifactorial, which we have trouble explaining. There are also diseases that are clearly monogenic, but we still have trouble explaining. There are specific heritable monogenic diseases that are only seen in Asian populations whose genetic basis is incompletely understood. So there's a whole opportunity for discovery, not just for scientific benefit and for understanding biology and targets, but also from the point of view of understanding what are the determinants of how to improve the lives of individuals, communities, and populations. So why aren't we doing better? Why do we have this unsolved problem? I mean, there are a range of issues involved, but one key issue, I think, is that if we look at sort of the global research landscape, there's a bunch of great population research going on in the US and in Europe, of course, the German national cohort. There's also quite a lot going on in East Asians, but if we look at South and Southeast Asia, which is home to 2.3 billion people, 30% of the world's population, to date, there's been really very little large-scale population health research. And in the absence of those data, how can we begin to understand the problem? There are some cohort studies of South Asians, but to emphasize the sort of the deficiencies, I'll refer to the Lollipop study, which is the only substantial longitudinal population study of South Asians that currently exists or existed today until recently. And this was a study that I set up with Professor Jaspal Purna at Imperial back in 2002, beginning of 2000s. And the Lollipop study was great in its time. We had 18,000 South Asians, 8,000 Europeans. They had some clinical characterization, some physical characterization, and some stored samples. But to highlight some of the deficiencies, these were migrant South Asians, not people living in South Asia or Southeast Asia. They were living in the UK, and so give limited perspectives upon the global health issues. Yes, they completed a cardiometabolic questionnaire, but there was very little relevant to cancer or respiratory disease or cognitive function or to GI health. It was focused on, it was a 50 question item. There was no dietary evaluation. The physical activity questionnaire was brief. There was no accelerometry, no functional evaluation, no imaging, no RNA, no stool samples. So, the cohort was great in its time, and I think did similar things to cohorts from around that era, 20 years ago. But in 2022, it's underpowered, doesn't have the relevant phenotyping or clinical samples. And that's, if Lollipop is the best sample data set for South Asians, well, that kind of helps you understand why, if we look at the global marketplace for genomic data, for example, it's predominantly European, and there's very little South Asian data, very little Southeast Asian data. And if it's missing for genomics, you know that it's also missing for behavioral, environmental, and other clinical phenotypic data too. So there's been a deficiency. There is a tremendous inequality in the global, in the availability of high quality research and molecular data for this vulnerable and very important major global population. So on that note, with colleagues, we have spent some years in the background trying to reverse this, to address this deficiency. And there are two bodies of work to talk about. One is the flagship study, PRECISE, which I'm CSO, and then there's a parallel study called South Asia Biobank that does its best, is very valuable, but doesn't have quite the same capabilities as something done in a high-income country setting. So I'll focus on PRECISE first. So PRECISE is the precision medicine program for Singapore. Singapore's a small country, 6 million people. So you might think, why do it? And I'll address that subsequently, but there are very good reasons why Singapore would want to lead a precision medicine initiative. That precision medicine program has been developed strategically over the course of, with a 10-year vision, led by Patrick Tan and Yisheng Tai back in 2018 to deliver phase 1. And now, as a wider partnership, we're into phase 2. Phase 1 is just establishing the proof of principles, the ability to do it, to get institutions to work together, to share their data and samples, to be able to generate genomes, be able to analyze those genomes in a meaningful way. Not going to deliver much scientific impact with 10,000 people, but you can lay your foundations. Phase 2, where we're at now, aims to deliver a precision medicine program of 100,000 people, and we're pretty advanced towards that now. And then phase 3 aims to bring it up to population scale, to bring precision medicine into healthcare settings and target perhaps 1 million people over the first few years. What were the achievements of phase 1? Phase 1 is wrapping up now. It was 2018 to 2021. And it was foundational. So, there were some building blocks to deliver on. So, for example, regulation ethics, making sure that the regulatory arrangements, the legal arrangements in Singapore and the country were favorable. And so as a tremendous achievement, Patrick and Yisheng have finally managed to move the governance of the country towards implementing a life insurance moratorium on genetic findings, initially in research and subsequently from clinical screening. And so that gives us the confidence we can go forward and do large-scale genome sequencing without risking the well-being of the community. It helps us understand that. There's been a big emphasis around public engagement to make sure that this is a program of work that's acceptable to multi-ethnic Asian communities. Starting to interact with industry, because industry partnerships are going to be valuable. There's start to think about what this might mean for healthcare in the future, in putting together some pilots for clinical adoption and implementation, and start to think about how we train the workforce up to understand genetics and genomics. And perhaps the center point there has been the initial sequencing and generation of methylation data and integration with research data for 10,000 people, 6,000 ethnic Chinese, 2,000 South Asians, and 2,000 Malay individuals. And that's been a success, as exemplified by the recent Cell paper reporting the initial findings, which included tens of millions of novel genetic variants that look to be specific for non-European populations, not documented in dbSNP. So that's been a success, and we've moved on, and we're now in phase 2, which is somewhat more ambitious. Phase 2 started this year, and this is kind of, if you like, the roadmap for it. So we start with a population cohort of 100,000 people, which we call SG100K. And those individuals will get fed into a molecular data generation pipeline that will deliver over the next 3 years whole genome sequencing at 30x, and also methyl epic arrays on 75,000 people is what we're currently funded for. Those are booked, they're scheduled to be completed over the next 2 to 3 years. But of course, as Annette has got her ambitions and her plans for multi-molecular data, that's obviously a critical objective for the precision medicine program too. Anyway, so we take the population data from S200K, we generate the molecular data, that goes into a data vault, and with consent, we then link that up with other routinely collected health-related data from the electronic healthcare record, and also from people's knowledge about from wearable type programs that health promotion teams, to give ongoing information about people's health and well-being and behaviors. Put that into an environment where the smart people can be analyzing it, generating insights, and then hopefully generate knowledge that will inform policy, will inform healthcare, and will inform discoveries that may represent targets that we can take forward with industry, or that industry can leverage by working with us. So I want to tell you a little bit more about the S200K cohort, because that's the foundation on which this discovery platform sits. It's 100,000 individuals, aged 30 and above. 50% have already been recruited, 50% are to be recruited over the next couple of years. Singapore is a multi-ethnic community. It's predominantly ethnic Chinese, with very large fractions of Southeast Asians, Malay, and South Asians, predominantly from South India. We're oversampling those ethnic minority groups so that the overall sample will comprise 60,000 Chinese, 20,000 South Asians, and 20,000 Malays, all characterized using a standard protocol. And there's deep phenotyping at the baseline evaluation. So comprehensive questionnaires that take about an hour and a half that include food frequency questionnaires, cognitive tests, and the like. Comprehensive physical measurements, including spirometry, cardiovascular fitness, visual function, DEX adiposity. Imaging, which at the moment comprises DEXA scan for bone density and body fat composition, 2 and 3D carotid ultrasound, retinal 2D color fundus, OCT, and OCT angiography is very nice. OCT angiography allows you to see the nervous and the vascular systems side by side. And there's an ambition to include MRI on a subset, which is hopefully will get started later on this year. Wearable data through accelerometry for a week using the Activity device as per UK Biobank. I alluded to ongoing wearable programs that might come through sort of integration with Apple Watches and the iOS Android equivalents. Great biological samples, which I'll show on the next slide. So, this is the sort of total roadmap of what we do. And in terms of the biological samples, yes, we've got blood, a range of plasma and serum and RNA, also stool, also skin tapes, so that we can understand what lives in us and what lives on us and how that relates to host physiology, and urine and saliva. So why do this in Singapore? As, a country of 6 million people, why invest such a tremendous amount into it? Well, it's because Singapore's multi-ethnic. It captures South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia in one country. And so the insights that we generate from Singapore will have tremendous relevance to the entire Asia-Pacific region. We can, if we're successful, operate as a beacon or as a flagship for 3 populations that have been underrepresented in the global biomedical research arena. And Singapore really is well positioned to do this. It's got the ethnic diversity, it's got fantastic infrastructure, it's got a great healthcare system that is a well-established electronic healthcare record system that's integrated nationally, so there's one place you can go to do the linkage. It's got the construct for the cohort means that we've got very high quality data collection, fully integrated systems, automated liquid handlers, -80 degree storage systems along the lines that Annette described, and support from the whole of government. So there's a whole industry behind this now, which I think means there's a tremendous likelihood of success, and the success will be meaningful for a very wide segment of global community. We can't do everything by ourselves. It's, you know, to leverage the opportunities from this, think about, you know, the transcriptome, the proteome, the metabolome, etc. We need to be working with people, and so we are keen to work with other partners, industry consortia, try forward components of the work. We've seen the way UK Biobank have done it, and it's very impressive, and we share that same kind of joined up vision. That's I think the tremendously exciting opportunity from PRECISE, the Singapore Precision Medicine Program. I'll touch briefly on complementary effort in South Asia, which is a low income setting, and so we have to be, you know, more circumspect and more cautious about what we can achieve. But that doesn't mean we're aiming low. We're trying to do the best we can in the setting. Here, for South Asia Biobank, this represents a collaboration between the 5 regions that I've referred to before: Pakistan, India North, India South, and Sri Lanka, with the ambition of recruiting about 30,000 South Asian men and women aged 18 and above in each of those 5 regions, so 150,000 total. There is one protocol, there is one data platform, and there's this one set of devices that gets used consistently in all settings. So there is absolute standardization of approach, common training manual. You know, supervising project management team have been around each of the regions to make sure that everybody's trying to do it to the same way. So hopefully that'll deliver a sort of a generalizable and robust data set. The platform's designed to be used in difficult settings. You know, we'd love to be working from wonderful hospital clinics with permanent electricity supplies, but it's not the case. Sometimes the internet goes down, sometimes the electricity goes down, and the platform has to be able to cope. It's cloud enabled, but can work online, offline. It's based around integrations of devices, so spirometry, ECG, retinal imaging are all just integrated directly to a local server, and then when the internet comes back up, the data gets uploaded. It includes a comprehensive lifestyle questionnaire and includes a 24-hour dietary recall. It's been a fantastic collaboration with University of Cambridge. And it includes stored samples, blood, serum, plasma, RNA, and urine. We were going great guns. We started at the beginning of 2019, and during the year of 2019, we recruited the best part of 60,000 people in a year. And then, of course, COVID struck in February, March last year, and we had a sort of an 8-month standstill while everything went into lockdown. But things have reopened again, and in the last 2-3 months, activities restarted. We're now back to recruiting 4,000 people per month, and we hope in the next couple of months we should get back up to recruiting 7,000 to 8,000 people per month, and hitting our targets of, we might not get the 150 now, we might only get 120, but hitting 120 in about 12 to 15 months' time. In addition to the phenotyping of the individuals, we also map out the environment they live in. That GIS mapping may hopefully give us a little bit more information about how behaviors, environments, and genetics are contributing to disease. We've piloted our follow-up. In this setting, it has to be face-to-face. There aren't robust electronic healthcare record systems. We followed up several thousand people as a proof of principle using our cloud-enabled platform, and we got, at least as a proof of principle, quite nice reproducibility for measurements of blood pressure, BMI, and other health metrics. So the baseline data looked good, and we seem to be able to recontact individuals and get reproducible data on a second occasion. It's the South Asia Biobank study is a big effort. There's a huge number of partners involved. It's funded by NIHR, and more recently Wellcome Trust have made a contribution. If I stand here to talk about it, I'm talking on behalf of very many colleagues and collaborators. The team probably involves 200 to 300 people across the subcontinent. So this is my last slide. There's no discoveries. There's no science in it. Sorry. This is just about describing, what we've been up to what I've been up to the last 5 years in collaboration with very many wonderful, much smarter, more driven people than me. I'm a voice today, not necessarily the driver. But this is where we've got to. 5 years ago, we looked at what was possible for Asian-focused centric research. It wasn't possible to do it. The cohorts didn't exist. now, from where we're at, we have at least one fantastic cohort in Singapore and an excellent second cohort in South Asia that together includes data on 250,000 people with great phenotyping, good biological samples, and suitable consent for use. We are expecting to have genome sequencing completed for most, if not all, people by 2024. In addition, in Singapore, there will be methylation profiling. We're actively seeking people to work with, either to help make use of the data to generate insights, to do federated analyses, meta-analyses, but also to advance the work around the other molecular platforms in partnership with industry or other large-scale academic consortia. And cheeky me, I'm sorry, but if anybody's interested and anybody finds these data exciting, we have a tremendous number, we're in a growth phase, and we have a tremendous number of opportunities at PhD, postdoctoral, or even faculty level for people who might have a passion for non-European population and precision medicine research. So thank you very much for your attention. That's the end of my talk.